The question is that the motion be agreed to. Darian Fenton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, there was a nice bit of soft soaping from the Minister about what is a bill that has caused enormous alarm in the refugee community and United Nations community. And in fact, they were outside Parliament today expressing that concern and have written to the Minister outlining once again their concerns about this bill, the damage that it will do to our very good international reputation, and the fact that it will do nothing to achieve its purpose, which is to deter people smugglers. Well, that was how it was originally positioned when it first came to the Parliament. The bill really, Mr Speaker, is about ghost ships. The ghost ships or polar bears, I suppose, but ghost ships are boat people who will probably never arrive on our shores. They're ghost ships that the government has used as a big stick to justify what is really a very reactionary and unnecessary bill. They're ghost ships of boat people who this government seeks to demonise through this bill and make New Zealanders fear them, in the same way that we have seen Australia do in a very divisive policy that they have been unable to move away from now through several governments. It is a brutal policy that's proposed in this bill of locking away ghost asylum seekers, numbering what will be 30 or more, of locking them up indefinitely as a group in mandatory detention. The justifications for this bill are almost as silly, Mr Speaker, as the Prime Minister's claims that hackers are targeting this country for information to help create weapons of mass destruction. That's how silly some of the claims, and particularly from John Key, have become. Last week, John Key told us that the arrival of 60 Sri Lankans on a rickety fishing boat in Western Australia, flying a New Zealand flag and saying they wanted to come to New Zealand, vindicated him. And we should be apologising for daring to criticise this disgusting bill. He said it vindicated his stance along with his agreement with Julia Gillard to take 150 refugees directly from Australia as part of our precious quota of 750. As part of that deal with Australia, John Key claimed there was an agreement that asylum seekers, if they ever arrived here, could be sent to Australia for processing. Now, putting aside the horror of New Zealand being responsible for sending asylum seekers to those places, those camps in Australia, in Nauru and Manus Island, so reviled and internationally condemned, where men, women and children spend years of their lives waiting, where some are so desperate they sew their lips together. There's a hunger strike going on right now in Melbourne, in a detention camp in Melbourne, where people, desperate people, don't know what else to do, or they suicide. Putting aside all of that, I wanted to know what advice the Prime Minister had received on whether Australia would allow asylum seekers that arrived here to be processed in Australian camps. So I asked Moby, under the Official Information Act, to provide me with information on any advice they had given to the Prime Minister regarding an agreement with the Australian Government to send asylum seekers who arrive in New Zealand to mass detention centres in Australia. Now, funny enough, they came back, Mr Speaker, and said they couldn't supply that information because it didn't exist. It didn't exist. So John Key made that one up on the spot, just as he's made up the weapons of mass destruction threat that we've heard today. John Key told us that he reckoned it was a pretty good deal when he was referring to the deal he'd made with Julia Gillard. He got done. He went to Queenstown to do a deal. He thought he could do something, and he failed, and he got done. And it's not a good deal to trade our international reputation for a cheap trade in human lives. And that's what John Key is guilty of, with trading 150 of our refugee places, our precious refugee places, in a political deal to appease the Australians. And what we got was an effective reduction in New Zealand's long-standing international promise to take 750 UN refugees and it's reduced it down to 600. And why it's precious, Mr Speaker, is we have always had a policy of taking those in most desperate need, the women and the children. And this policy that John Key signed up to means what we do. What we got out of it was a chance to join Australia in one of the most appalling offshore refugee policies in the Western world. And what we get with this bill is no better.
Sorry to interrupt the honourable member. The time has come for me to leave the chair for the dinner break. This debate is interrupted. I shall resume the chair at 7:30.